Sorry, light was great.
आरंभ से पूर्व आज के विशिष्ट अतिथि, मुख्य वक्ता, लेखक, अधिवक्ता सुप्रीम कोर्ट श्री जय साई दीपक जी से मैं आग्रह करता हूं कि वे मंच पर आएं व अपना स्थान ग्रहण करें। I also request श्री राणा प्रताप सिंह, convener Short BHU, to accompany Shri Sai Deepak ji on stage. As an arguing counsel before the Supreme Court of India and High Court of Delhi. He completed his mechanical engineering BTech from Anna University. He completed his bachelor's in law from IIT Kharagpur in 2009 and has been part of several landmark matters such as Sabrimala Ayyappa Temple, Shri Padmanabh Swami Temple and Basmati rice indicators, etc. He is a prolific writer on constitutional issues and author of the two books, Constitution and India, Bharat and Pakistan, the constitutional journey of a sandwiched civilization. I would request research scholar at Department of Political Science, convener, Shodh BHU, Shri Rana Pratap Singh ji, to formally welcome Sir with presentation of mementos and patka. Pandit Omkarnath Thakur ji ने किया था, and I would like to call upon mic from Center for Vedic Science Neha Singh ji for her recital of Kulgi.
मधुर मनोहर अतीव सुंदर की सर्ववेद्या की राजधानी मधुर मनोहर अतीव सुंदर ये सर्ववेद्या की राजधानी ये तीन लोकों से न्यारी काशी सुज्ञान धर्म और सत्य राशि बसी है गंगा के रम्य तट पर ये सर्ववेद्या की राजधानी नए नहीं है ये ईट पत्थर है विश्वकर्मा का कार्य सुंदर रचे है विद्या के भव्य मंदिर ये सर्वसृष्टि की राजधानी यहाँ की है ये पवित्र शिक्षा कि सत्य पहले फिर आत्म शिक्षा के हरिश्चंद्र थे यहीं पर, ये सत्य शिक्षा की राजधानी, राजधानी। वह वेद ईश्वर की सत्यवाणी, बने जिन्हें पढ़ के ब्रह्म ज्ञानी, थे व्यास जी ने रचे यहीं पर, ये ब्रह्म विद्या की राजधानी, राजधानी। वो मुक्ति पद को दिलाने वाले, सुधर्म पथ पर चलाने वाले, यहीं फले फूले बुद्ध शंकर, ये राज ऋषियों की राजधानी, राजधानी। सुरम्य धाराए वरुणा अस्सी, नहाए जिनमें कबीर तुलसी, भला हो कविता का क्यों ना आकर, ये वाग विद्या की राजधानी, राजधानी। विविध कला अर्थशास्त्र गायन, गणित खनिज औषधि रसायन, प्रतीचि प्राची का मेल सुंदर, ये विश्वविद्या की राजधानी, राजधानी। ये मालवीय जी की देशभक्ति, ये उनका साहस, ये उनकी शक्ति, प्रकट हुई है नवीन होकर, ये कर्मवीरों की राजधानी, राजधानी। मधुर मनोहर अतीव सुंदर, ये सर्वविद्या की राजधानी, राजधानी।
Now to formally welcome our guests and the audience present here, I would like to call Kunal Jha, member Shodh BHU.
Good evening everyone. I would like to formally welcome Shri J Sai Deepak ji sir, best-selling author of India That is Bharat and Supreme Court advocate. I welcome you sir on the behalf of Shodh BHU at Banaras Hindu University. I would also like to welcome our respected teachers, dear students and all distinguished guests. सर को उनके वक्तव्य के लिए यहाँ आमंत्रित करने से पहले ये आवश्यक है कि उनकी पुस्तकों पे मैं कुछ बातें कहूँ। सर ने इंडिया ट्रायोलॉजी सीरीज में 3 किताबें प्रस्तावित हैं, जिसमें से 2 उपलब्ध हैं। सर की पहली किताब इंडिया दैट इज भारत, कॉलोनियलिटी, सिविलाइजेशन, कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन, भारत के ऊपर औपनिवेशिक चेतना के प्रभाव को एक्सप्लोर करता है। हाल ही में प्रकाशित सर की दूसरी पुस्तक इंडिया, भारत एंड पाकिस्तान, द कॉन्स्टिट्यूशनल जर्नी ऑफ सैंडविच सिविलाइजेशन, आधुनिक भारत और भारत के संविधान के ऊपर यूरोपीय और मध्य पूर्वी औपनिवेशिक प्रभाव का वर्णन करती है। यह पुस्तक इस्लामिक नवजागरण व मुगल साम्राज्य के पतन के साथ खिलाफत आंदोलन के अंत तक नव राष्ट्र पाकिस्तान की अवधारणा पर भी प्रकाश डालती है। सर का मैं बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद करता हूं कि सर ने हमारा आमंत्रण स्वीकार किया और सर को काशी हिंदू विश्वविद्यालय में बहुत हार्दिक स्वागत करता हूं। आप सभी के तालियों के बीच में आपका पुनः स्वागत करना चाहूंगा। धन्यवाद।
थैंक यू। कुछ थोड़ी सी फॉर्मेलिटीज़ और हैं। पहला तो ये कि जिस बैनर के थ्रू सर को इनवाइट किया गया तो उसके बारे में आपको बता दिया जाए। तो शोध BHU अखिल भारतीय विद्यार्थी परिषद का एक आयाम है जो शोधार्थियों और शिक्षकों के बीच कार्य करता है. Students for Holistic Development of Humanity. We organize workshops, seminars and lectures. Focus है academic writing को, especially university में उसके culture को develop करना और improve करना. ये कार्य हम विभिन्न विभागों के साथ सहयोग करके करते हैं. हम एक student run quarterly त्रैमासिक पत्रिका भी निकालते हैं राष्ट्रार्चना नाम से, और हम and we plan to publish some booklets on specific topics and issue. I would also take this opportunity to welcome the campus president Akhil Bharatiya Vidyarthi Parishad, Shri Singh ji, and also senior professor, Department of Political Science, Professor Sanjay Srivastava ji. Thank you, sir. And without taking much of your time, I'll invite Shri J Sai Deepak ji on the mic to begin his discussion on his books.
Namaskar. First of all, my gratitude to the organizers for getting me an opportunity to interact with the students of this great institution, started by Mahamana. I think apologies are in order, but then I can't tender an apology on behalf of Vistara because the flight was delayed by an hour. But be that as it may, thank you for the patience and for the energy levels here. Over the last 72 hours, I've barely had a sleep for 6 hours at a stretch. But the moment I entered the room, seeing this audience, I think my energy levels must spike. Given the thought behind decoloniality, I'll try to keep this discussion in a dual language as much as possible. मिश्रित भाषा का उपयोग तो होगा. And fortunately, since I come from Hyderabad, unfortunately I know a bit of Urdu. So, maybe Bhagyanagar as opposed to Hyderabad. And having been in Delhi for 13 years, some of the Delhi traits have managed to rub off on me as well. Basic aggression plus Delhi aggression. So that's a very different level of aggression altogether. Upar se vakil. Doesn't really help. So I'm really grateful for the audience here. How many of you are from my biradri, the legal fraternity? Ah, good, fantastic. Okay, very good. So all the Upadravis are here. I wanted to convert this into a full-blown interactive session, but given the size of the audience, I think it's going to pose a bit of trouble to the organizers. So I'll try and keep this as structured as possible. But let me take the liberty of saying let's indulge the audience for 20 minutes at the end, where apart from the questions that have been collected, to compensate for my late arrival, can we try and do that? Yeah. I'll be the moderator who asks. Rest assured, this is not a scripted show. I don't know any one of you from Adam, sorry, Manu. So I think I've already spoken enough on the scope of the book on multiple platforms. How many people have managed to follow the journey of the second book? Okay, fair enough. So the outline of the book has been succinctly captured by the gentleman who spoke before me. Perhaps I should explain the journey of why the book was written, why the books were written, more than what the book is about. I don't see the point in giving out spoilers. You might as well buy it. I'm told that most of the books have been sold here. So around 2004, when I was at a crossroads in terms of what is it that I wanted to do after engineering. This was perhaps at the fag end of the second year of mechanical engineering. How many mechanical engineers here? Very good. So, I was confused not because I was unsure of what I wanted to do, but I thought I could perhaps adopt more than one option. So it's not as if engineering was thrust upon me. I was not a reluctant engineer. It just so happens that I felt that my skill sets were bound to find better expression in a different platform altogether or through a different profession. And although aerospace engineering was something that I seriously wanted to pursue a master's in, 2004, according to me, was a turning point for a lot of people in my generation, given the political developments of that particular year. And as someone who was fairly vocal about the vichardhara that he subscribes to, which I think is fairly evident from the color of my kurta, the idea was to perhaps address the constant arrogant barb that people who subscribe to this point of view are incapable of sophisticated articulation, and they lack the grey matter needed to represent their position with clarity. And I was sick and tired of that particular allegation. I think enough is enough. And so, coupled with a lot of experience with on-campus politics, not that I was an active member, but being in the South, the cancer called Dravidianism manages to make its presence felt on campuses across the board. It's very difficult to escape its tentacles even if you don't want to. Even if you just want to focus on what you have come to the campus for, which is education, you will not be left alone. So in that sense, you get pulled into this particular controversy. And then you realize that there is no chance, there is no way in hell that you can make the decision, or you can take the decision to steer clear of it. Because even if you choose to, until you give up what is most fundamental to you, which is your identity, ye aapka picha nahi chhodegi. So I said, if that is the case, I might as well turn around and start talking. And at that point, IIT Kharagpur had organized a paper presentation in the Industrial Engineering Department. It's called the Optima Fest. So I'd gone to present my final year project. This was in 2005, late 2005. After my placements were done. And then we were told that a new program was about to be initiated at IIT Kharagpur as part of a new experiment to see if a law program with a specialization in intellectual property could be incubated in these technical institutions. And since most people who come from engineering families are bound to struggle to explain the viability of law as a choice of career to their family, to their parents. Surprisingly, banking is okay, management is okay, but law is not. You can go as far as possible from engineering, but certainly not the law. Thus far and no further seems to be the rule. So, between civil services and law, the choice was to perhaps opt for the law, for the simple reason that with my kind of candor, it is difficult to survive in the bureaucracy. And with my kind of outspoken nature, it's very difficult to do jihuzuri, which I am not capable of. So, therefore, the logical choice was to perhaps understand the architecture of the system through the legal profession, and also understand iske daab pesh kya hote hain. And that's one of the reasons I made the choice. To bust a few popular myths about my choice, I don't come from a family which has a line of blue-blooded lawyers, not one bit. It's a standard southern engineering family which knows nothing beyond engineering and certainly nothing beyond mechanical engineering. We have produced only mechanical engineers. So even within engineering, the daira is very, very seamless. That's it, nuts and bolts, period, literally. So it was very difficult to sell that program to the family. Multiple roundtable conferences happened. I was even accused of perhaps having a taste for marijuana before it became a fad on campuses. My choice of friends was questioned, and the kusangat that I was apparently roaming around with, its details and its kundali had to be looked into. And finally, it came to a point where I said, look, it's not law, it's law in an IIT. So sometimes when the product itself is not capable of being sold on its own, you focus on the brand of the product. You say, forget the product brand, look at the house mark. And so I was hoping that that would effectively broker a deal between the family members and myself. And plus I had also told them, from here don't worry. So their entire allegation was, are you going to become a lawyer who's going to wear mismatched flip-flops, riding a Hercules cycle, carrying files around for a senior? And that's the worst possible stereotype that a southern engineer can be ever accused of. So I said, no, from here I'll directly go in-house. Companies, that's what I'm interested in. But litigation is where my heart was very clearly set. So what's the point of breaking that news? I didn't lie, I just decided to postpone the disclosure of the truth. And therefore I took the decision that I will do that after I graduate, by which time most of the arrangements were done. But the reason why I chose the subject and I was vindicated in making that particular choice was the moment I entered the campus, this much was very clear, that I was going to have a blast of a time at IIT Kharagpur in the law school. Simply because of the sheer exposure to the kind of subjects the moment you enter the portals of law school you get in terms of political science, this and that. It was a very different experience altogether. And around that period, since it happens to be in Bengal, you can naturally expect politics on the campus of IIT Kharagpur as well. Which means the default color is a bit darker than the shade of my kurta. And so on a regular basis, there will be some problem or the other. A vegetarian mess which had been running for decades was forcibly shut in 2006 under a particular dispensation at the center, saying, no, this is Brahmanism at work, so there cannot be a vegetarian mess on the campus. When in fact, a lot of people who subscribe to that particular mess were not doing so not just for religious reasons, they were also doing it because that was their food choice. All they said was, this is the one mess that's been going on here for decades, why do you have to shut it? So that was my first brush with fairly organized protest on the campus, where we have to finally say, if someone had come forward with any kind of allegation of a slightly different nature and a different color, would this have been your response? And the management did not realize that the matter had been quickly elevated to a very different level altogether. And so they said, okay, let's move a step back, and that hostel was restored. This in itself is not a big issue. I think this is par for course on most campuses. The question was of the intent behind that particular interference. And that kind of interference and the intent behind that kind of interference gradually started from 2004 onwards, but from 2006 even more so, when there is a very clear intent to introduce a particular stream of thought on engineering campuses, which are predominantly either neutral from a Vichardhara point of view, or which could be branded nationalistic. तो उस पर्दे को किसी भी हालत में उनको दूसरी तरफ झुकाना था. And that's how full-time undergraduate humanities programs came to be introduced from 2006 onwards. It just so happens that I happen to be the unintended counterproductive product of that particular experiment. They never wanted someone like me to come out of these institutions and through that experiment. So I hope that some people are able to relate to this particular journey. And therefore, the conscious decision that was taken after a point was that you need to be able to acquire a certain set of skills for you to confidently present a particular opinion and for you to be taken seriously, regardless of whichever Vichardhara you may subscribe to. Which is to say, research and facts before opinions. Should you adopt this particular approach, there are two consequences of this. One, you will be taken much more seriously because you're not going to be seen as someone who faffs around, who just simply throws his weight around. That every statement that is being made will have a certain degree of substantiation. That's one. Two, आपके अंदर के जितने भी प्रीकंसीव नोशंस हैं वो फैक्चुअल रिसर्च के द्वारा अपने आप को टूटने लगते हैं. So your own position will go through a certain change. Three, you're building a narrative which is based on fact and not on propaganda, which I think is the most serious issue. So when people speak of narrative building, I'm sorry, I don't subscribe to narrative building beyond a point. Because narrative building simply means आपने दिशा भी तय कर लिया है, आपने डेस्टिनेशन भी तय कर लिया और आप उसके हिसाब से फैक्ट्स को काट पीट के आप अंदर उसमें घुसाने की कोशिश करें. That's the textbook definition of confirmation bias, which is not what any researcher is supposed to do. You allow the research to inform your opinions as much as possible. Unfortunately, humanities in this country is significantly grusset with the exact opposite approach. So if at all I'm trying to present a particular narrative, it is only this. Please allow facts to breathe and for them to get a certain space in academic portals so that students and readers and audiences can form their own opinions at the end of the day. I may have a certain bias which is very clear. I may have a very clear ideological proclivity, a very clear ideological tendency which I am not going to ever shy away from. Just as any other human being is bound to have his or her own position, or maybe his or her non-binary gender positions, whatever they may be. But the strength of your position will come through not just on the basis of the conviction or the theatricality with which you present it, but on the factual edifice that you build. Uska neev kitna strong hai. The foundation needs to be rock solid. So my limited suggestion to the members of today's Sabha, regardless of whichever way your ideology tilts, perhaps try giving facts a chance and let debates start on the basis of facts as opposed to labels and stereotypes. It might help find a certain meeting ground, and it might even tell you that there is perhaps no meeting ground possible whatsoever. Because if you disagree on the basic fact and its refutability or otherwise, then clearly your intention to negotiate with the other side in good faith comes out. अगर आप एक बेसिक तथ्य पे ही agree नहीं करना चाहते हैं, that much is clear that it's no more a good faith discussion. It's a completely bad faith argument. Having seen all of this as part of several campuses and subsequent interactions with students on let's say on major leftist campuses, I've realized that there is still some ray of hope, because fortunately opinions have not become so concrete and so solidified that it's difficult to change them. Even in the most hostile of campuses, where there have been posters plastered on walls asking me to go back, which says effectively Brahmin go back, was the plaster in most of these places. I said, doesn't matter, I'll engage with them. By the time the interaction is done, about 30% of the audience is willing to open up its mind a bit. And the ones who've always been outnumbered and who've been silent, because they don't know whether a particular opinion or its expression will have a certain repercussion, उनके अंदर भी रीढ़ की हड्डी आ जाती है. So perhaps what I'm trying to convey is that I have come to this campus to perform the role of Narada Muni. I will do what I need to provoke a few thoughts, present a few provocative opinions, but with a lot of civility, without a single slip of tongue, in the hope that it presents a model worthy of, at the very least, consideration, if not emulation. I leave the choice entirely to you. Which is to say, there is nothing wrong when holding a provocative opinion. But if you hold it for its own sake, without any basis, then you're a rebel without a cause, who is perpetually angry and who's constantly looking for villains to fight, which in my humble view would be the textbook definition of a woke idiot. So, I'm saying subscribe to the left, no problem. Just don't go woke. A sane left is any day easier to discuss and deal with and engage with than going hard woke. Because that position brooks no engagement, brooks no discussion, brooks no dissent, and has no interest in any kind of compromise whatsoever. So try and preserve the sanity of the discourse on this particular campus. It need not go in any particular direction fully. Let there be diversity of thought. No problems. But there must be a basic agreement on the rules of engagement between two parties. And that as a culture needs to come about from this great institution, given the legacy of the founder. That is something you must seriously consider. As a child, he was known for taking on missionaries on streets who would go about evangelizing people. That's the kind of prodigy whose legacy you've hopefully inherited. Take some of those things out when you go to this particular institution and try and apply it in multiple places. 2, I say this with a lot of respect and humility, which goes against my nature, that Bharat is effectively standing at the cusp of a fantastic demographic dividend, provided it is in a position to use this energy in a constructive way. Woke politics will single-handedly pull down Bharat's journey. So please do consider this fact, that if you lose this particular dividend, when Japan is aging, Europe is aging, and several of these countries are aging, and Bharat has a fantastic youth demographic, if this particular time window is lost, I don't know when we will recover it again. Operate with a sense of responsibility. As someone who's made his share of mistakes both on campus and off campus, I'm not asking you to lead a sattvic life on campus. All I'm saying is balance your indulgence with your responsibility. Find a way to come out of this place with your cultural filter intact. That would be the single biggest token of gratitude, both to the people who have sent you here and to the institution which you're a part of, which will be your alma mater. Banaras Hindu Vishwavidyalaya is truly an institution in itself, and I don't mean an institution in terms of its infrastructure, but the thought is a fantastic thought. When it was established in 1916, if you read the circumstances in which it was established and the backdrop of the movement it was a part of, please realize that it has a huge value, kind of, legacy that you've inherited is immeasurable. So please be cognizant of that. And most importantly, learn to be unabashed and confident of your positions in terms of representing them. The first step towards making a change in the so-called narrative building exercise is confident, informed expression and vocalization of your position. You can be in a minority, that does not matter, shouldn't make a difference even one bit. If your ability to represent your position is a product of or is a function of the number of people who stand behind you or by your side, then you have zero conviction in the position on its own. You're only looking for safety in numbers. I will not stand by such cowards under any circumstances. If the single biggest message that I'm trying to present through my interactions in multiple campuses, even the most hostile of campuses, is have the guts to engage, have the confidence to present your opinion to public scrutiny, uski taiyari bhi kijiye, but never be bogged down by numbers under any circumstances. There could be a situation where the entire world is wrong and you're right. If you're confident of it, stand alone. Doesn't matter. And that message needs to be drilled into every Hindu and the Hindu Samaj. Don't look for allies, especially when you know for a fact that there are fundamental differences. Every alliance and every collaboration is only strategic in nature, but at the end of the day, you are your plan A, you are your plan B, and you are your plan C. That spirit of self-reliance is critical. Second, perhaps I can afford to say this after 14 years of experience as a Supreme Court litigator and a High Court litigator, as an engineer who's made the transition. There is not a single subject that you're not capable of mastering should you choose to surrender to it. The very publication which has managed to publish my book a few years before the release of my first book stalled the release of another book. Most people are aware of this.
That was based on Delhi riots.
Correct.
By Monica Arora.
Some lady wrote that.
I didn't spell it out, thank you for spelling it out. So I haven't created any trouble for myself with the publisher. Be that as it may, most people thought that after that they were never going to publish anything that comes from this so-called side. That hasn't happened. Because beyond a point, economics का अपना एक role होता है. Learn to use the power of economics to push your civilizational position as much as possible, because no matter what you do, the bottom line cannot be ignored. And therefore, today, after the tapasya of several people who have not got the recognition for their work, who have gone completely unrecognized during their life and time, like Shri Sitaram Goyal, Shri Ram Swarup, and all these people, people like me are benefiting from the foundation that they have laid. So I say this with a lot of confidence and pride that I stand on the shoulders of unrecognized giants. And therefore, operate with that sense of responsibility each time you get the benefit of vocalizing your position, because a lot of people, a lot of generations passed away without ever getting this freedom. जिस पोजीशन के बारे में और जिस विचारधारा के बारे में आज आप खुल के बात कर सकते हैं, that was a completely unpopular position and a sidelined, marginalized, shoshet, trasit position for decades together. Finally, we have arrived in a position where we can confidently speak of it. I'm still saying the job is not done. There is a lot left to be done. But we can't be snubbed anymore, we can't be stifled anymore, we can't be silenced anymore. That much is clear. Now that history has given you this fantastic Overton window, आपको काल ने जो opportunity दिया है, इस अवकाश का पूरी तरह से सदुपयोग कीजिए. It is most important. I genuinely hope that this institution, and at the very least the people who have bothered to attend this particular session, produce subject matter experts of world-class quality, regardless of the areas that they choose. Because the one thing that I will never compromise on, I'd prefer to go with a person who is competent at what he does than a person who has a lot of commitment to the ideology but brings nothing to the table by way of value addition. Makes no sense whatsoever. So I had the opportunity to say this at Nagpur last evening, so allow me to repeat this. Even if it sounds repetitive, this audience needs to know it. Those who are capable of fantastic work are being pushed in the opposite direction. And those whose hearts beat for the civilization are being deprived of their skills. So which effectively means the fantastic ideal combination of Josh and Hosh is missing. So I'm trying to ask you to blend both. Logic without conviction will never find a larger purchase because you will never be able to make an impact on the lay audience. And conviction without logic means that the thinking section of the society will never take you seriously. Your job is to connect and act as bridges between the elites as well as the masses, because both are important. And the role played by Muslim elites and Muslim masses in a fantastic way, paving the way for the creation of Pakistan, is the saransh of the second book. And therefore, my lessons to this particular audience, they come specifically from my reading of that literature of that particular period. This is very, very crucial. The masses and the elites cannot operate in silos if this particular civilization has to survive. They have to walk hand in hand. Because the masses provide the muscle needed to get a job done. The elites provide the thought leadership necessary to show the direction and to deal with the international audience which is waiting to see Bharat fall. I have not come here hoping for a thunder of applause for every statement that I drop as if I'm constantly putting out pearls of wisdom. That's not the intention here. I'm hoping to actually engage with you very seriously. And I hope that at least a fraction of my journey proves useful to you to understand how to deal with the circumstances in your own situation. That's the sole purpose of my engagement here. So, take both the books seriously, not for the author. Not for the author. Take it seriously only for what it represents for the civilization, and uska मूल्यांकन आप उसके basis पे कीजिए, not on any other angle. Not for YouTube videos, not for following on Instagram, on Twitter, or any other place. That is useless. कल अगर Elon Musk ने he decides to pukofy and he says I'll shut down this thing, क्या following कहेगा following सब हो गया, 5 मिनट में सब उड़ गया. What are we talking about? Makes no difference. The question is that a country of 1.3 billion is dependent on an American billionaire to have a social platform for its own social engagements. That is what we should be focusing on. That our ability to engage with each other politically is contingent on a Westerner even today, after 75 years of independence. These are questions for you to ask and answer. So when I speak of decoloniality, it's not just in the cultural realm, it also speaks in the realm of science, it also speaks in the realm of entrepreneurship, development, whatever it may be. In that sense, it is nothing but a call for Atmanirbharta. 3. नैरेटिव तो बिल्ड होता रहेगा, इकोसिस्टम बनती रहेगी, उससे कोई फायदा नहीं होगा जब तक आप अपनी संस्कृति को डेली बेसिस पे प्रैक्टिस नहीं करते. Which means your ability to represent your position with confidence and conviction will always find itself bloodless and lifeless as long as it is not informed by anubhuti and experience. The central feature of Bharatiya Darshana is Anubhava, Anubhuti, experience, first-hand experience. If that is missing, you will never be in a position to represent it. It will only become an ego investment where you are trying to win over your friends on social media debates. But in terms of your personal growth and progress, you are bound to find nothing. Fortunately, it's not just the Friday that's important for us, every day is important for us. So you've been given a fantastic buffet of options. Plus you've inherited your own legacies from your families. Make a choice. There is no point in talking about the survival of the civilization if you do not practice the basics that are expected of you at the personal level. There cannot be a change at the macro without a change at the micro level whatsoever. Don't expect it even one bit. That's not going to happen. So, beyond this, I am not going to bore you with an extended pravachan. I am going to take a lot of questions as much as possible in the hope of addressing your concerns and to see if I have answers to your questions. The standard rules of engagement, introduce yourself so that I know where the question is coming from in terms of what is the experience that is informing that particular question. That's why I need the identity. 2, rules of engagement also mean follow civility, keep it to the topic, be provocative. You will not be stopped from asking any uncomfortable question. With respect to my own inconsistencies in my position, or the allegation that I'm a communalist who is out to divide people on campuses, go ahead, ask me those questions, no problems. Those are the kind of questions that I will welcome, because that will open the floodgates and it will create fantastic YouTube moments. 3, as a last venture, my sahanubhutis are with people in the fag end. So try and ensure that we take as many questions as possible from a cross section, because obviously diversity is the current fad.
Thank you, sir. We'll wait for 1 or 2 minutes. Okay, as sir explained, we will have some questions from the Google form which we collected earlier. We have sorted some of those questions, and to give the audience a fair chance, only some of the questions have been taken from there, which we feel were good enough. Hindus in themselves are very divided on the lines of caste, sampradaya, so to speak. This, in my opinion, is the root issue of the current state of Hinduism.
Second book is extremely prasangik to this particular question, because I've tried to show how divisions are not unique to the Hindu society and that they're equally present in other societies as well. The difference is, other societies have a fantastic sense of who's an outsider to their worldview, which means उनका शत्रुबोध जो है crystal clear है, and therefore आपस में वो चाहे जितना भी लड़ते रहें. You asked the question? Yes, okay. जब बाहर वाले की बात आ जाती है, वो इकट्ठा हो जाते हैं. Please, आप इसको और थोड़ा as a perhaps a lay student of psychology, human psychology, just consider this. Leave any other civilization, any other Sanskriti or Sabhyata. Given our journey, diversity must be expected. Because there will be thought diversity as people go along. If it's at least 7,000 years, assuming that's a very conservative number, you must expect vividata without a doubt. तो आप क्या यूनिटी के बेसिस पे ह्यूमन साइकोलॉजी को पूरी तरह से आप स्नब करते रहेंगे? It's not going to happen. When people were fighting for Ayodhya, किसी ने एक दूसरे से ये नहीं पूछा कि आपकी कास्ट आइडेंटिटी क्या है, आपकी जात क्या है. Nobody was asking this question. They only came there as Ram Bhakts. Agarwals have died, Ahirs have died, Brahmins have died, everybody has died. When the police was firing at them, nobody asked each other, भाई ये यादव है या क्या है? ये सवाल किसी ने नहीं पूछा. So use this basic नुस्खा of human psychology कि आप लोगों को एक cause दीजिए to rally behind. Nobody asked questions relating to language or caste. When Shivaji was fighting the Mughals, तब तक तो ये सवाल उठे ही नहीं थे. एक मिनट के लिए मान लेते हैं कि जितने भी हिंदू समाज के अंदर विकृतियां हमें पढ़ाई जाती हैं, ये उस कालखंड में भी था. एक मिनट के लिए मान लीजिए. But that did not stop the Hindus from uniting with each other to fight. At best, the division may have been political, but it was not caste-based or language-based. So the story that is told about the Battle of Panipat is how the Jats and the Marathas had a certain difference of opinion, or maybe they could have supported. I'm not getting into that. But ये इसलिए नहीं हुआ था कि ये जाट हैं वो मराठे हैं. That was not the reason. It was a political consideration of a different order altogether. So what I've tried to show through the first and the second books is the British man did not have to deal with the issue of caste in Africa, and still the better part of Africa is either Christian or Muslim. He did not have to deal with the issue of caste in New Zealand. The Maoris are not to be found in as many numbers anymore. Canada, you're still finding mass graves, right? तो वहां पे क्या जाति प्रथा थी? So he invents excuses each time he goes to a particular jurisdiction to say, मैं यहाँ पे आपका उद्धार करने के लिए आया. And he is taking upon himself this benign burden, which is otherwise colonization. And he continues to justify his presence, saying, अगर मैं यहाँ से निकल जाऊं, तो आप एक दूसरे को काट के मारेंगे. Indians told this to each other when the freedom movement was going on, by the way. That means the man had successfully convinced the colonized people that his presence is necessary for us to stay united. That is the success of the Christian European colonizer. And The alpha level of the success or the beta level of the success is उसके जाने के बाद भी we are dealing with the very same issues. So I disagree with this proposition entirely. 2. How do you think the armed forces are structured? Every man is not fighting for the army, they are fighting for their corps, their unit, their company, the color of that particular company. That's what they immediately relate to. It is federal unity. That is, the unit is fighting for the whole and the whole will fight for the unit. If that is how this structure operates to defend us, why is it important? Just आप इसको और एक step इस स्तर को आगे बढ़ाइए. For you to be able to commit yourself to a particular identity or a परिचय, वो आपके जितना नजदीक हो, it is easier for you to say this belongs to me. An amorphous Hindu identity makes no sense to most people, where sampradayas make sense to most people. Trick ये है कि संप्रदाय के साथ जो जुड़ाव है, it should never prevail over the larger dharmic unity. That is a different question altogether. उस unity को achieve करने के लिए आपको सब identities को destroy करने की जरूरत नहीं है. जब आप ये करेंगे, सबसे basic question which even communism has not been able to answer till date, and that's why it is a failed ideology, वो किसी चीज को replace करने की तो बात कर देते हैं, लेकिन उसको replace किस चीज से करेंगे? What is the solution that never comes out? Okay, let's assume that आपने इस grand Hindu unity project को भारत के पैमाने पे इसको अमल करना शुरू कर दिया. तो आप लोगों से क्या कह रहे हैं? Give up all your institutions which survive on those sampradayik identities. चाहे वो मंदिर हो या जितने भी प्रथाएं हो, they are all connected to some tradition or the other. I suspect at least 50% of the audience has watched Kantara. Yes. Right. Okay. What most people perhaps may not have paid attention to is that folklore is also a hereditary practice. And the entire movie is about the son finding the way back to the profession of the father. And he's haunted by nightmares throughout the movie for his deviations. And finally he comes back to the way of the father, the prodigal son returns home. Now when you speak of the problem with hereditary structures, आप इस argument को folk art में लेके जाइए. Let's see how does it work. Why do you need hereditary structures? I'm not making an argument for why birth-based jati is right. I'm sure this is going to be confused with that. Let me try and explain this. When you inherit a particular tradition, आप इस institution से जब बाहर जाते हैं, you effectively have pride with respect to the institution which is your alma mater. You inherit those legacies. So any KGP guy, if he meets the other person, guy, girl, whatever it may be, we start with the standard motto of KGP, of Kharagpur, which is KGP ka tempo high hai. That's how we use it. So that's how we interact with each other. How do we interact? The next level of interaction is, आप कौन से hall में हैं? What's your hostel? JCB, Jagdish Chandra Bose, Vishweshwaraya. That's how it goes. So you relate to the traditions of the hall that you come from. I am saying it's so surprising that we find it difficult to apply the very same logic to these structures. Because every jati tradition represents a knowledge tradition. उसको और उस बीज को बचाने की जिम्मेदारी उन्होंने ले रखी है, so that some family continues over a point of time. And there is some member of the family who constantly says, मैं इसकी रक्षा करूँगा. Public property means it belongs to everyone, correct? Okay. But every time there is a problem in this country, which is the property that is first attacked? Public property. क्या आप उसको बचाने जाएंगे, अपने घर को बचाने जाएंगे? क्यों? ये तो आपकी भी है ना? ये संपत्ति आप सबकी है. बस को जलाया जा रहा है और आपके घर को जलाया जा रहा है. आप किसको चूज करेंगे? इन दोनों विकल्पों के बीच में आपका चुनाव किसका होगा? घर को होगा भाई. Because public property is nobody's property. Because the relationship between you and public property is amorphous. It exists in thin air. Because आप कहेंगे ये देख लेगा, वो कहेगा ये देख लेगा, वरना स्टेट देख लेगी, बात खत्म. हिंदू यूनिटी ऐसे ही फेल होगा, क्योंकि आपने अंदर के जितने भी स्ट्रक्चर्स हैं उसको तोड़ दिया होगा और कोई इसकी रिस्पांसिबिलिटी नहीं लेगा. But who is going to provide thought leadership? That's not going to happen. There's a reason that our industrial houses still survived because of the Vaishya traditions and the safety networks and the guilds that they built. A Brahmin will never have the confidence to start a business as much as a Baniya does, simply because of the inherited legacy of taking risks. Of course, there may be individual exceptions, but the existence of an exception only points to the existence of a rule. Departure का मतलब ये है कि एक benchmark तो बन गया, वहां से आप deviations को देखते बैठेंगे, but it is still a deviation, it's not the rule. If you happen to come from a certain background which says I will pursue knowledge, the rest of the society is going to take care of me, then you are not going to invest in risk-taking activity from a financial perspective. These are products of a pre-industrialized society, where the vocation of the father effectively becomes the vocation of the son. And I will say son, because at that point it was a male-dominated force. So you can accuse me of misogyny, but you can't change history. So considering that, क्वेश्चन अब अलग होना चाहिए, which is एक इंडस्ट्रियल एज में क्या इस धर्म का कोई महत्व रह चुका है? That's a question you ask, but there are people who are still following their ancestors' practices and traditions. आपने ये डिसाइड कर लिया है कि आप मॉडर्न इकोनॉमी के साथ आप जुड़ जाएंगे, तो ये आपका निजी डिसीजन है. You can't stop others from following their practices. As much as you will not be comfortable with them imposing their structure on you, you don't have the right to impose your worldview on them, because they are saying, हम इस धारा से अलग रहेंगे. If you're willing to give the Jarawas in Andaman the right to be away from civilization, as we call it, because you're saying these are certain cultures and ways of life that need to be protected, why can't you extend the very same benefit of doubt to others? क्योंकि इसमें you will immediately be forced to look at it from the Marxist literature of class war, because उनका सीधा यही allegation होगा that this entire structure was created only for oppression. That's exactly why Marxism's role in killing indigenous societies' native systems must be understood, and भारत से बेहतर केस स्टडी आपको इस विषय में नहीं मिलेगा. दुनिया भर में जाके ये नेटिव आइडेंटिटी की बात करेंगे, उसकी रक्षा करेंगे, because that's the underdog. लेकिन भारत में आते ही it is the native identity that becomes the oppressive identity. That's why in the first book I clearly show Marx अपने आप कह रहा है that I may have my disagreements with colonization, but उपनिवेशवाद का एक fantastic ये consequence ये है कि Asiatic ways of life will be destroyed, which is to say India and China, which are the major civilizations, उनके अंदर के जितने भी societal structures हैं, knowledge structures हैं, वो पूरी तरह से टूट जाएंगी. Therefore, colonization is important. No wonder Marxism in this country and communism in this country is constantly pushing the Western agenda. What an irony! They may have a problem with United States, but they otherwise don't have a problem foisting Western ideas in Bharat. That is the paradox in their positions. So, ऐसे मुद्दों पे थियोरी से ज़्यादा प्रैक्टिकल्स की और नॉलेज इंपॉर्टेंट हो जाती है, क्योंकि then you will ask, अगर कोई ट्रेडिशन आज भी जिंदा है और कायम है, it's not because some fellow from a different tradition comes and says, मैं इसकी रक्षा करूँगा, इसको आगे लेके जाऊँगा. Those people have continued. 1200 years of butchery, savagery, destruction, burning of libraries, and this experience is replicated where? In Persia. Is replicated in Andalus, therefore Spain. Please sit. In all these places this is replicated. वहाँ की संस्कृति नहीं बची है. यहाँ पे किसने उसको बचाया? Everyone takes care of their own traditions and says हम इसकी रक्षा करेंगे. That is precisely why, despite all this, there is some continuity between how Bharat existed before 8th century and its current existence. आपको कुछ तो उसमें continuity नजर आ रहा है, क्योंकि किसी ने तो इसकी जिम्मेदारी ली कि हम इसकी रक्षा करेंगे. The problem with this discussion is that it is bound to be infused with the missionary British narrative of how untouchability was prevalent. मैं उसको कभी deny नहीं करूँगा. I am not going to deny that something has happened. But मैं आपको और एक example भी इसके साथ दे दूँगा. सती का जो एम्पिरिकल एविडेंस है, इट इज नगण्य, ऑलमोस्ट नेग्लिजिबल. इन्होंने इसको भारत के बाहर पेश कर करके वहां से मिशनरी कॉन्ट्रीब्यूशंस को यहाँ पे इनवाइट किया. The credit for this entirely goes to Claudius Buchanan, a Christian missionary, and I've pointed this out from his own literature, but you can read better literature. Dr. Meenakshi Jain's book on Sati. जगन्नाथ यात्रा को पूरी तरह से डिमोनाइज किया इस आदमी ने. So he goes on the one hand to say women are burnt, and on the other hand people commit suicide in front of the रथ यात्रा. और इस शापित लोगों को हमें बचाना है, और हम बचाएंगे कैसे? तो आपका हर प्रॉब्लम का सॉल्यूशन यही है. तो इसका मतलब आपका मकसद यही है. Why should I change my position now? If you want to help a person, you can also do that without pulling away that person from his roots. But that is not your goal. Your goal is very different. तो ये सिर्फ एक pretext है. What is the अनुवाद for pretext in Hindi? Bahana is Urdu. What is in Hindi? Please find it. Decoloniality. So I used अनुवाद and not tarjuman. So therefore, sorry. Okay, fine. I did not. Purvagra is it? Okay, fair enough. ठीक है. So when you look at this larger picture, then the picture becomes very clear. आप जब तक भारत के कॉलोनाइजेशन की हिस्ट्री को अपने आप में पढ़ेंगे, which is to say you look at it independent of anything else, you will always find mistakes with our society. But when you see the same culprit going to 10 different countries, from Latin America to Australia to New Zealand, he's converted everyone. Why am I supposed to not come to the conclusion, this is your end goal? Is the experience of the Northeast any different? No. Is the current day Andhra Pradesh any different? No. Is Punjab any different today? No. Res ipsa loquitur. The facts speak for themselves. That's it.
सर, उनके सवाल से और आपके जवाब, आपने कहा कि सब अपने अपने कमरे की रक्षा करेंगे, हम लोग एक ही घर के हैं, तो ये ज़्यादा आसान रहेगा. तो ऐसा क्या कारण है सर कि एक कमरे वाले दूसरे कमरे वाले से बहुत ज़्यादा इससे रखते हैं? हम अब्दुल के यहाँ शादी में चले जाएंगे लेकिन किसी SC/ST के यहाँ नहीं जाएंगे. क्या आपको नहीं लगता सर यहाँ पे कास्ट सिस्टम जो है हिंदू सोसाइटी को कमजोर कर रही है? जी,
I agree with you. I fully agree with you. In the last two talks, I said something slightly controversial, but I might as well say it. जब ये पूरा मूवमेंट चल रहा था, पूना पैक्ट, on the discussion for separate electorates for SC/STs, Dalits and all that, and Harijans. Apart from the voice of Dr. Ambedkar, there have been other voices. और जो उसी let's say वर्ग से आते हैं, और उनका भी जो position है, I think it's important for us to realize. I've given this example at least thrice of a Dalit activist from Trichy, Tiruchirappalli, who took the position that if I am being told that जातिवाद को खत्म करने का सिर्फ एक ही रास्ता है कि हिंदू धर्म को पूरी तरह से मिटाना, I will never accept it. Okay? दूसरा, आपसे ये किसने कह दिया that I don't have jati pride when it comes to my traditions? He was not a Brahmin asking this question. Under the definition of Varnashrama Dharma, he called himself V4, which means he identified himself as a Shudra. And he clearly said, who told you that I have no confidence in my traditions? मेरे अंदर ये inferiority किसने भरा है? Who are you to tell me that my ancestors have always been oppressed? We have ruled this country as even Shudra kings in several places. We have had Shudra Kshatriyas also. Reddis have identified themselves as this. मंदिर उन्होंने बनाए, तो ये आपसे किसने कहा? So then he said, I am not fighting for the destruction of my dharma because I will die as a Hindu, nor am I asking for the destruction of these sub-identities. I am asking for equal respect as other identities. That is his position. Now, if it is our position that उस आइडेंटिटी का रहना ही अपने आप में एक ऑपरेशन को क्रिएट कर देता है. Today apparently we are being told that gender identity leads to oppression. तो उसको भी मिटा दें. तो आज के कुछ लॉ स्कूल्स में you have unisex washrooms और केसेस निकल रहे हैं वहां से of harassment. Because apparently a boyfriend who wants to stay in the same hostel as his girlfriend says, self-determination, what nature has blessed me with, I will cover up. That's the argument. जब तक सोसाइटी का एक कॉन्सेप्ट है, परिचय का कॉन्सेप्ट उसके साथ चलेगा. Because identity and society go hand in hand. परिचय तभी मिटेगा जब आप संन्यास ले लेंगे, तब आपके जाति आइडेंटिटीज भी मिट जाते हैं, सभी मिट जाते हैं. और जब तक आप जंगल में नहीं जाते हैं और आप बाहर रहेंगे, आइडेंटिटी आपका पीछा कभी नहीं छोड़ सकती.
तो सर आप सेल्फ माइनॉरिटी की बात कर रहे हैं.
जी.
ब्राह्मण का जितना पॉपुलेशन है
जी,
वो अगर यूनाइटेड मुस्लिम या यूनाइटेड ईसाई की पॉपुलेशन से तो ब्राह्मण माइनॉरिटी में आ जाएगा,
जी, जी.
माइनॉरिटी में आ जाएंगे, क्षत्रिय माइनॉरिटी में.
जी. तो what is the question from? Go ahead, make your point. Therefore,
ये तो हम और डिसॉल्व हो जाएंगे ना सर.
no, so it's not like that. So I'll tell you what my position is. I am never going to say that let us limit ourselves to our limited wells. That's not my position. मेरा ये clear position है, आप इन आइडेंटिटीज की रक्षा भी कीजिए, लेकिन आपको जोड़ेगा हिंदुत्व का सूत्र. Which means आप इन आइडेंटिटीज की रक्षा अगर करना चाहते हैं और आपको लगता है कि आप कर पाते हैं, 90% ऑफ द लोग आज के डेट में नहीं करते हैं, ना कर पाते हैं. लेट्स बी वेरी क्लियर अबाउट इट. कौन कर रहा है? 10 people or 15 people sitting in the temple or those associated communities. Most people don't do it, right? I've said this before. ऐसे कितने लोग हैं जो मंदिर के अंदर प्रवेश करने से पहले चमड़े का बेल्ट निकाल देते हैं? कितने लोगों को आज ये पता है? Very few people know it. Very few people know it. I had to be reminded of it in one particular case. So, लेकिन जो इसको बचा के रखना चाहते हैं, I am saying उनको आप करने दीजिए. So, what is the example? Let me give you a very clear example. Is this the only society which has these issues? No. इजराइल में अल्ट्रा ऑर्थोडॉक्स Jews, जिनका काम ही होता है उनके रिलीजन को बचाना. So, what are the different varieties of Jews you find there? Ultra Orthodox, conservative, modern, secular. These are all the variants of Jews there. So conservative is also not ultra Orthodox, by the way. There's a very clear distinction between the two. There's a paper that I read a few days ago where they clearly say, ये एक दूसरे से कोर ट्रेडिशंस के बचाव के विषय में कैसे लड़ते रहते हैं, लेकिन जब जूइश इंटरेस्ट को प्रोटेक्ट करने की बात आती है, तब ये एक साथ हो जाते हैं. When they realize that हमारे और पैलेस्टीनियंस के बीच में जो रिश्ता है, इसको हम कैसे डिसाइड करेंगे, then everybody comes on the same platform. But on whether a Jew can marry a non-Jew, the ultra-Orthodox position is not possible. Whether conversion is possible into ultra-Orthodox Judaism, they say no, not possible. Others say no, it should be possible. तभी तो हमारी तादाद जो है बढ़ेगी. तो reformist views और conservative views के बीच में जो तनाव है, वो हर सोसाइटी का हिस्सा है. We are not exceptions to it. तो मैं ये जरूर कहूंगा that आप इन आइडेंटिटीज को try and keep it seamless to your homes and at best certain societal transactions if they are still necessary for you. But when you interact with each other, do not limit yourself to that particular identity. Don't ask yourself जो जेल में बैठा है या फिर ये जो दरोगा है या फिर एक ब्यूरोक्रेट है, ये कहाँ से आता है? अपना आदमी है कि नहीं? Don't ask these questions. I'm hoping that we can move in that particular direction. Now, see, here's the point. Let's take the other side of the position, which is to say, आपने इस institution के खिलाफ समझ लीजिए 300 साल की मुहिम आपने छेड़ दी. At least for 200 years this has been going on. Let's assume that is indeed the case. You've still not succeeded in dislodging this institution fully. तो इसका तो नतीजा सिर्फ यही निकल सकता है कि ना आपने इसको ठीक से समझा, और you know for a fact that even if you understand it, there's really nothing that you can do about it because it will continue to show itself in a different way. Your next argument can be what? Are you saying that there are no societies with jati? They may go under different names. point is, let me finish this, otherwise I'll be seen as giving you entire line. Right? So hold on to this. So my point is, every society is the product of its own cultural journey. Fortunately or unfortunately, this has been our journey. And your revolution has not managed to dislodge this particular divide. Then the only way that you can operate is, as opposed to fighting it, which is a battle that you seem to be failing at, how do you use it to your advantage to secure the larger interest of the society? पेस बॉलिंग का अटैक चल रहा है, आप छक्का नहीं मार सकते हैं, उस स्पीड को आप कैसे यूज कर सकते हैं? Which is, do you nick it and send it away or not? That is the only question. I've given this example before. Nassim Nicholas Taleb clearly says that a tradition which has withstood the test of time has the record of time to support it. And each time you try to challenge it, you're fighting time and not the tradition itself. And therefore you're bound to fail. That is the central thesis of his book, Anti-Fragile. Which is to say that these traditions are anti-fragile. No amount of shocks from within or outside will dislodge them. Do an honest analysis of how much you can actually dislodge all of this, provided you have replacements for it to protect those knowledge traditions. If you don't, then you're simply a person who says, I will destroy this identity, but you don't have a reason as to why, and what are you going to replace it with? इन दोनों प्रश्नों का जब तक आपके पास ठीक से उत्तर नहीं है, आप थोड़ा सोच लीजिए. Yes.
Ashutosh Jha from Bachelor's Faculty of Arts. Yeah, he's here. He asked, many people today fear to say anything in support of Hindu unity and against the Islamist forces, whereas many prominent figures adored by the same, such as Rabindranath Tagore, P.V. Kane, S. Radhakrishnan and several others, were able to say confidently in their times. Why?
Perhaps because they were still not bitten entirely by the bug called secularism. It was relatively new. Those filters were still not being applied as much, so people were able to speak openly. Among the finest expositions of Hindu nationalism that I've read so far is an article written by Lala Lajpat Rai, who clearly said that Hindu-Muslim unity is a farce. It does not exist. And the Congress should stop reaching out to the Muslims in the hope that they can build this ephemeral unity. Instead, they must focus on consolidating the position of Hindus. That was his position. That was one of the reasons that he was hated by the Naramdal and the moderates in the Congress. I've extracted those portions in the book. The question that perhaps you may want to consider is this. You're the gentleman who asked this question? Aapne pucha? You, okay, sorry, okay. Oh, you had to ask a question. We'll come to you. So, Shivaji, or Chhatrapati Shivaji, when he was fighting, was obviously outnumbered in terms of the size of the enemy. Okay? And yet, he was confidently able to use the word Yaman and something else when he was referring to these people. The other word starts with an M. Right? He had no problems doing that. The freedom that Shivaji had when he was surrounded by an ocean of green is not the freedom that you have in independent Bharat in 2022, which apparently celebrates free speech. That is because आपके मन के अंदर अभी शंका बैठ चुकी है और बिठा दिया गया है कि ये कहना सही है या गलत है, क्या ठप्पा लगेगा, will I be branded this or that. This is what Sri Aurobindo called Chakshu Lajja, which means the need to be politically correct and always sound as the patron saint of Vasudeva Kutumbakam, right? That burden is constantly on you. So they will keep saying what they want and what they have to, whereas the burden of observing filters in your language and your conduct is exclusively yours. Fortunately, people like Rabindranath Tagore did not suffer from this Chakshu Lajja. He openly said what he had to. But if you read what I've said, the single biggest contribution in a negative way of the founding of the Congress as a platform is to drill into your head these politically correct filters which prevent you from speaking the truth. So yesterday, I think Dr. Madhu Kishore put out a fantastic tweet, and I think visually as well as verbally she was great about it. हरी तलवार को हमेशा बचाता है लाल रंग का ढाल। उस ढाल को तोड़िए, तलवार अपने आप बोलना शुरू करेगा। Then there is nobody to protect this actual discussion. Nobody who's providing the intellectual cover fire. That's why the culprit is not the one who sets the house on fire, but the one who creates justifications as to why the house must be set on fire. And that is the role of the left. Single-handedly, that's the contribution of this country. If at all the word contribution can be used. This is their role. This is their stated role right from the beginning. So, a certain group of districts proved to be the epicenter of the Mopla riots, of the Mopla, let's say, outrage in the 1920s, August 1921 onwards. And that, let's say, group of districts have a specific demographic composition. One chief minister creates a single district out of that as a reward for their position. And the chief minister was EMS Namboodiripad, the communist chief minister of Kerala, creating the district that goes by the name Malappuram. This is the cozy relationship between the left and the jihadi. In one of my discussions with Jaipur Dialogues, I had specifically said, remove the left from this equation in terms of having a direct conversation with the other side. And it will be a much more honest conversation. Because the left is effectively saying that apparently Mahmud of Ghazni came to Somnath to save the non-Brahmins from the Brahmins. 17 बार आया था वो ब्राह्मणों से बाकी लोगों को बचाने के लिए. Imagine, ये टेम्पलेट किसने शुरू किया? ये मिशनरी ने शुरू किया. इस टेम्पलेट को बाद में अपनाया गया था. तब तक तो ये were very clearly saying गाजी था, ये था, वो था, मार दिया and all that. You are very blunt about what you did it for, who you were doing it for. हमारे उद्धार के लिए थोड़ी कर रहे थे. तो एक आके कहता है आपका धर्म परिवर्तन जो हो रहा है आपके उद्धार के लिए हो रहा है. दूसरा आके आपसे कह रहा है आपको मारा जा रहा है आपको उद्धार के लिए. Everybody is constantly interested in sending us to Jannat. So look at this. Look at the arguments being presented. The utter distortion and dishonesty in the way history has been presented. Last week or so, one fantastic portal. Should I name it? Yes. It prints, I leave it at that. Specifically wrote a piece about how Srimad Muhammad Ghori, that was the language used, had departments for patronage of Sanskrit apparently. Delhi language is perfect for such instances. My position and the nature of the audience and my basic civility prevent me from using it, at least in public. I had asked myself this question, do you think all of us are a bunch of idiots? Is this what you want us to consume, lock, stock and barrel? And who's writing all of this? It's not a Muslim who's writing this. It's not a Christian who's writing this. It's a Hindu. It's a Hindu, at least a Hindu in name only, who's writing this. What do? Therefore, deal with the left. First, deal with the left. Call out their BS. Then it's easier to have a proper conversation. Next. Yes.
Can I have one?
What do you want?
I'll interrupt. We have 5 questions. We have 5 questions, and I'll request you to be a little short on these.
You want me to be shorter?
Fine with me. The question it relates to where it's not working. It relates to the part where you advise to deal with the left. The Indian revolutionaries and the freedom struggle are usually shown as socialists by the academia. Why?
Perhaps you may want to consider the fact that when they are trying to deal with the British colonizer, they are latching on to as many ideologies as possible which are anti-colonial in nature. Understand it from that perspective. They are looking at the socialist revolution or the Russian revolution primarily as a response mechanism to deal with the British. So even if they were socialists, did it come in the way of their identities as practicing Hindus or not? That's the question that you must perhaps ask. And can you compare the socialists of that particular period with the current day socialists who seem to have a serious problem with the Hindu identity at the outset? If that is not the case, that means socialism that masquerades as socialism today is a convenient vehicle for anti-Hindus. And therefore, none of these people can claim to be intellectual descendants of the socialists of the past. So apparently, I met this person who comes from the publishing industry. So one of the stall leaders of the Communist Party, who comes from a Telugu background, apparently made it a point to go to college campuses, and his only claim to fame of being a communist was he was sent to jail for 25 minutes once during emergency. That's it. Whereas all other organizations which are branded as communal were entirely behind bars for the longest of periods possible, going through lots of torture. Even Mr. Jaitley did not escape torture. So this person comes out, goes to colleges, speaks of class war, capitalism, this and that. And this particular gentleman who was narrating the story to me was a student then. He had the good fortune of accompanying this person from the talk to India International Complex, rather India International Center, and then watch him open a bottle of scotch, talk about expensive watches, so on and so forth. Compare that with even perhaps the early communists like M. N. Roy, Kanu Sanyal and others. These were people who lived in huts and hutments and whatnot and actually did something which they believed in. They could have been wrong, but they were willing to walk the talk and sacrifice for what they believed in. That's not the case with contemporary socialists or communists. They are the occupants of what is known as Lutyens' Delhi, which represents the creme de la creme and the elites of the current day society apparently. And I don't think any one of them operates with a phone which is less than an iPhone. I don't know what brand of socialism this is. So there is no continuity here. And the origins of Indian communism and socialism will be dealt with in the third book, because I'll just reveal the scope of the third book. Of course, it's no more a trilogy, it's no more a trilogy. It's a 4-book quartet. So the third book will cover the period from 1925 to 46. And the final period of Constituent Assembly debates of 46 to 50 will be covered in the fourth book. The fourth book will coincide with the 75th year of the Republic, which is 2025. The third book, I hope to release it in Jan 2024. And there I'll be looking at 4 forces. The first book introduced the European Christian line. The second book spoke of the merger between the European Christian line, the Middle Eastern Islamic line. The third book will speak of 2 other movements, the Sangathan movement and the communist movement. How do these 4 movements play with each other? Which decides the destiny of Bharat? And what is the final impact of this movement on the Samvidhan? That will be addressed in the 4th book. That would be more or less the nature of it. So, people latch on to some of these ideologies. It's like this. You're fighting an enemy and you see an experience in some other place which is, looks like they've given birth to an ideology that is unfavorable to the enemy. Can I use it to free my country? That's how you will have to understand Netaji's partnership with the Nazis. You're not a Jew for you to sit and look at it from an Israeli perspective. You're a Hindu, you're a Bharatiya, you're supposed to look at it from your perspective, which is to say, how do I take advantage of it? When in a public discourse, and this is a very popular debate in America, Nelson Mandela was asked by members of the American Jewish community as to whether he found it conscionable and justifiable to collaborate with terrorists from the PLO to support his cause in South Africa. He said, I am not a Jew for me to look at it from the perspective of Israeli Jewish, let's say Israeli Palestinian prison. I have a certain problem that I have to deal with in South Africa, and whoever I am comfortable dealing with to get the job done for my people, I will do it. Surprisingly, nobody speaks of Nelson Mandela in the very same tone as Netaji when it comes to his alleged links with the Nazis. That is mighty convenient, because the moment you go after Nelson Mandela, you'll be accused of racism. You'll be accused of racism. And you'll be accused of a certain kind of phobia. And once that label is effectively affixed to your forehead, it's very difficult to get out of that. And in that sense, I would say that the African American community has done a fantastic job of presenting their victimhood than Hindus have managed to. Therefore, even Hindus have a lot to learn from how they have projected and captured their history. I am not saying therefore celebrate victimhood and therefore don't take responsibility for anything lying within. I am simply saying at least don't let the aggressor get away with the statement that aisa kuch hua hi nahi tha. Because if you're willing to forget and move on, at some stage he'll come back and tell you aisa kuch hua hi nahi. Which is the difference between the attitude of a particular group in 1947, because they were heavily under the guilt of the partition, and the current behavior in 2022, because we have not drilled it into their heads. You were responsible for the division of this country on the basis of a particular identity. And this Punya Bhumi, this Karma Bhumi, this Janma Bhumi has been vivisected only because of you. That we have not told them, which we should have through textbooks over and over again. Good. Otherwise, why would Yusuf Khan change his name to Dilip Kumar? Right? He knew that, sorry, there are some things that have to be answered for.
Dhiraj Singh, a research scholar in the Department of Sociology, and it relates to the very current situation, or the very current, the Varanasi Tamil solutions for growing hostility between North and South India.
This hostility is manufactured primarily because of Dravidianism. I put the blame entirely on the Dravidian ideology. A movement which has to its credit the claim for asking for a Dravida Nadu and asking for secession from India should not be treated any differently from Kashmiri separatists. They must be treated as that. There is no distinction there. Having said that, I am not going to bat to a predominantly North gallery here. I will also point out that make it a point to learn at least one Southern language. Do that. Just as people of the South must learn some other non-Southern language, I would expect people of the North to also learn at least one Southern language. Bridges must be the product of mutual decisions and mutual steps taken towards each other. It cannot come from only one side. The expectation cannot be from only one side. Nobody can accuse me of Hindi phobia. I've spoken in Hindi as often as possible in as many platforms as possible. So this comes from a person who certainly doesn't have a grina for the language. I love the language. But I know what is right and what is wrong, at least in my limited head. So I'm going to say, build these bridges, and in that particular direction, I think this initiative is fantastic. The only disagreement that perhaps I may have is some of the tweets which were put out with respect to this particular event from official platforms and official handles called it the unity of two civilizations. It should have said diversity of a single civilization. The moment you say it's unity of two civilizations, you start this nonsensical competition as to which is the older language. And then you're giving more fodder to the Dravidian cancer who's waiting for this opportunity. So I'll just take one final question from you, and then I go to the audience. Yes?
Okay, I'll take another contemporary issue instead of the ideological issues of civilizational identity for the audience. I'll leave it to them. What's from Sanjeev Singh, Research Department of Statistics? What's your take on recent judgment on EWS quota by the Supreme Court? Because he respects the decision because of its authority of the court, but he says 8 lakh is too high to consider a person poor. The property of 1,000 square feet residential flat of that will have different value in the different places in India. So what's your take on that decision?
So I have a broader principal disagreement with the decision on allowing the 10% rule, the 50% rule to be breached. That is something that you may want to consider. I am with the introduction of the EWS metric, because if that EWS metric is not introduced, reservation would become a race to the bottom for the Hindu society. Which means that every community on the basis of its muscle is bound to say, I want it, regardless of my ownership of land, regardless of my representation politically, or my representation of the bureaucracy or state employment. There are quite a few such examples in Maharashtra and Rajasthan. I will not name the community, but I think the audience is mature enough to understand. So that is the problem then it becomes a function of muscle and not a function of whether there is true backwardness. Two, again, Tamil Nadu has already breached the 50% barrier by asking for 69%, which has been somehow not challenged properly, or it is seen as okay. That's a terrible example, because when you offer a slice to the Lomadi, it's going to ask for the entire loaf. And they will push further. No other group has managed to secure the release of convicted assassins who have murdered the Prime Minister of India. This is the only group that has managed to do this. And that is the power of, let's say, ransom in the hands of the Dravidian coterie. The ones who murdered Indira Gandhi will not get that benefit. Kashmiri militants will not get that benefit. People from the northeast who have been convicted will not get that benefit. Why should these set of killers get that benefit? And they come out and get to play even victims. All of that is not going to be possible without adequate state and ecosystem support. So I am very clear that if you look at how the EW's argument is being played, I am of the view that, one, the 50% rule needs to be respected as much as possible. At the same time, there must be some room for economy-based positions with respect to reservation. It need not be just caste-based. But let's take it to the most uncomfortable level possible. I am not going to support for any kind of reservation for Dalit Christians and Dalit Muslims. You have effectively chosen to walk out of this particular fold saying that this fold translates to oppression, and that apparently the new fold is egalitarian in nature. In which case, I congratulate you on that particular decision. But I am not going to give you a parting gift for life. Because I have to protect my demographic as a Hindu community. I am not going to create incentives for people to convert out of my community. That is not the expectation of secularism under any circumstances. So I am clear that these reservations, when they ask, because if you look at some of these organizations called World Justice, so on and so forth, these are all evangelical organizations, they have two primary deliverables which they mention on their website publicly. One, reverse the decision of the Supreme Court in Reverend Stanislaus versus Union of India, which says that the right to convert is not a fundamental right of right to religion. They want to reverse that decision. They say that as much. They are seeking funds from people saying, we need to push the Supreme Court to create a larger bench to revisit this decision. Then the second pet peeve has been, recognize the category of Dalit Christians and Dalit Muslims for the purposes of STSE reservations. Neither of these must be exceeded under any circumstances. So, now the baton goes to the audience. I'll take a maximum of 4 questions because we are at 7:30. There are some book signings, I'm told.
सर, मैं अभिषेक उपाध्याय. सर, मेरा सवाल एक है कि जैसे सर मैं ज़्यादा पीछे की बात नहीं कर रहा हूँ. जैसे यथार्थवाद की जब से क्रांति चली, प्रेमचंद्र की लेखनी का शुरुआत हुआ और उनकी जो कहानी संग्रह आई प्रथम सोजे वतन, तो वर्तमान सरकार द्वारा उसको बैन करा दिया गया क्योंकि वो राष्ट्रवाद की कहानियाँ थी. तो सर उसी समय उनकी जो कहानियाँ थी वो दलित चेतना की कहानियाँ भी शुरू होती हैं. जैसे उन्होंने तमाम कहानियाँ ठाकुर का कुआं, सदगति वगैरह लिखी. और उसी समय एकदम सेम टाइम में 1-2 साल अंदर में महामना जी ने हिंदू महासभा की स्थापना की. 1925 में हेडगेवार जी द्वारा राष्ट्रीय स्वयंसेवक संघ की स्थापना की गई. तो सर मेरा आपसे यही सवाल है कि उसके बाद तक, मतलब मैं 1910 को ले रहा हूँ, 1910 से 2020 तक लगभग 120 साल के बाद भी ये जो हमारी संस्कृति को विदृढ़ करने वाली प्रथा थी, ये सफल रही या हमारी संस्कृति थी, हमारा सनातन धर्म था, फेलियर रहा उन जो पिछड़ों को अपने तक मिलाने में, जो अभी तक हमसे असंतुष्ट हैं. और उनकी 100 साल पहले लिखी कहानियों को, सर मैं बिहार से बिलोंग करता हूँ और हम गाँव में आज भी उदाहरण देखते हैं कि जो गोदान में हमने गोबर और धनिया को पढ़ा वो हमारे सामने दिखता है. सर थैंक यू.
one of the causes that I have actively chosen to represent, and most people are aware of it, is Mandir ki Vimukti from state control. I've said this. And one of the reasons that I've said that is मकसद को पाना इसलिए इम्पोर्टेंट हो जाता है ताकि मंदिर का जो रिसोर्स है कैन वी यूज दैट फॉर टू थिंग्स वन find a way of establishing a community management system which involves all four Varanas. That's one. Second, जितने भी लोगों को रिजर्वेशन से तकलीफ है, रिजर्वेशन को मिटाने के से पहले उसके लिए आप एक रिप्लेसमेंट की बात सोचिए, which is the exact argument I gave some time ago. Therefore, can you use the resources of the temple to say मंदिर का जो धन है उसमें से 10% या 15% जो है इनकी पढ़ाई लिखाई में जाएगी और इनकी शिक्षा के लिए जाएगी। जब तक आप ये नहीं करते हैं, पब्लिक में जो नैरेटिव होता है दैट मंदिर और इन पिछड़े हुए वर्गों के बीच में बहुत फासला है और अंतर है, वो आप कभी मिटा नहीं पाएंगे। दैट विल बी शोन ओनली थ्रू एक्चुअल इनिशिएटिव्स। सो आई एम वेरी क्लियर अबाउट द फैक्ट दैट एक जगह पे आप यू कैन प्रोटेक्ट द ट्रेडिशंस ऑफ द टेम्पल, उसके जितने भी सांप्रदायिक राइट्स हैं आप उसको भी प्रोटेक्ट कीजिए, लेकिन यूजिंग द रिसोर्सेज ऑफ द टेम्पल टू एड्रेस सम ऑफ दीज सोशल प्रॉब्लम्स इज अ फैंटास्टिक मैसेज। देखिए क्या होता है कि आप चोर को एक दो बार ही आप गाली दे सकते हैं कि ये आके चोरी करके जा रहे हैं, लेकिन दरवाजा आपने खुला छोड़ा है। Therefore, you must be in a position to provide alternatives to the missionary organizations, which means health services, education. At the very least इसको तो आप एड्रेस करके देखिए। हिंदू दिमाग में ये तो बैठ जाना चाहिए कि हर मंदिर के साथ एक हॉस्पिटल जुड़ा होता है और एक स्कूल जुड़ा होता है, which is exactly the memory recall when you speak of a church. Now, whether you disagree with them or not, I would say those are great initiatives from that side. That इन्होंने ये पब्लिक के मेमोरी में ये बिठा दिया है, इनके माइंड में ये बिठा दिया है that these are the organizations that go with us. Most of us seem to be taking a lot of pride in going to convent schools, which shouldn't have been the case in the first place, right? But that is the product of an investment of 270 years at the very least. It started in 1835, it's going on till 2022. So इसको अगर चेंज करना है, then आप मंदिर से ही शुरू कर सकते हैं. So there is a fantastic provision in the Tamil Nadu HRC Act. उसमें एक प्रावधान ये है that जो surplus money होता है वो वापस जाएगा इन कम्युनिटीज के बेनिफिट के लिए। ऐसा एक प्रावधान है जिसको हमने कोर्ट में चैलेंज नहीं किया, बिकॉज द गुड पार्ट्स हैव बीन लेफ्ट एज इट इज। जहां पे पूरी तरह से स्टेट का कंट्रोल आ जाता है हमने उसको चैलेंज किया है, बाकी सारे जितने भी प्रोविजंस है उसको चैलेंज नहीं किया है। ट्रस्ट के कॉम्पोजिशन में SC/STs का भी उसमें कॉम्पोजिशन है एज पार्ट ऑफ द ट्रस्ट मैनेजमेंट फॉर एवरी टेम्पल। दोज प्रोविजंस हैव नॉट बीन चैलेंज्ड। प्रॉब्लम ये है दैट स्टेट कभी भी इलेक्शन नहीं करवाती है फॉर कॉन्स्टिट्यूटिंग द ट्रस्ट, and always it is an executive officer of the state who is appointed. So end result क्या होगा, लोगों को कभी ये नहीं दिखेगा that state ये नहीं करवा रहा है, उनके दिमाग में सिर्फ ये रह जाएगा that मंदिर इन लोगों को कभी भी अपने मैनेजमेंट में नहीं बुलाएगी। So it's like this, एक ही अधिनियम के दो प्रावधान हैं, एक ये कहता है कि कम्युनिटी का मैनेजमेंट होगा, दूसरा ये कहता है कि अगर यहाँ पे घपला हुआ तब आप अंदर आएंगे इस रीजन को रिकॉर्ड करके। आपने कम्युनिटी मैनेजमेंट के जितने भी प्रावधान हैं उनको कभी अमल में लाया ही नहीं फॉर द लास्ट 60 years, एंड द स्टेट इज अपॉइंटेड एग्जीक्यूटिव ऑफिसर्स अक्रॉस द बोर्ड। सो नेट रिजल्ट क्या हुआ, इट रिमेन्स इन स्टेट कंट्रोल, मतलब करप्शन भी ज्यादा हो रहा है। टेम्पल एज एन इंस्टीट्यूशन गेट्स नो अटेंशन व्हाटसोएवर फ्रॉम द स्टेट, वेदर इट उसकी देखरेख की बात हो या लेट्स से इट्स मटेरियल रिसोर्सेज आर कंसर्न्ड, एंड यू आर नॉट एबल टू यूज इट फॉर एस्टैब्लिशमेंट ऑफ स्कूल्स और हॉस्पिटल्स। सो प्रॉब्लम जो आपका डेफिनेशन है प्रॉब्लम का, आई एग्री विथ यू, बट हल भी मंदिर से ही निकल सकता है। सो व्हेन यू स्पीक ऑफ टेम्पल्स, प्लीज डू कंसिडर द फैक्ट that a lot of issues that you allege against the temple, that it's full of money and all of that, in the bulk of the temples, because the state is under state control, they keep hiking the prices. Tirumala Tirupati Devasthanam, all the price rates are determined by the state. There is no say whatsoever from the community. Jagannath Puri is entirely controlled by bureaucrats. जितने भी 36 मठ हैं जो मंदिर को कंट्रीब्यूट करते हैं, मेन मंदिर श्री मंदिर को, they don't have enough money to do their Niti Puja on a daily basis. They are not even in a position to send the daily bhog that they are supposed to send. This is the reality of the temple ecosystem in this country. Unfortunately, all of this comes back to haunt only one particular community or two communities. So, which is one of the reasons, in the last 4 or 5 years, I've tried my best to bust some of these myths about temple control. So that people actually realize that the temple has performed a social function over the generations. It has always performed this function. Its ability to perform this function has been completely killed only after the modern Indian state has come into existence. I'll take 2 more questions. The gentleman has been waiting. Yeah, go for it. The one with the stripe jerking. Yes.
But through the movies and through other proceedings which we have seen, even live court sessions which are available on YouTube, what we have seen that even not ordinary people, people of the rank of administrative services and all, when they go in a court, they stand as they've been struck by something, some kind of lightning or some divine force, and they are so humble. We cannot say humble, it looks like they are enslaved, and they talk, my Lord, your honor, your holiness, your highness. So where is this hangover? And what is the judicial community doing in this regard? And when in the same, this context can be taken into a larger picture that when it comes to responsibility, the people who are sitting at the higher echelons of judiciary in our country, talking about the Supreme Court justice and all, when they go into that position, they start behaving like the Almighty, Aham Brahmasmi kind of that feeling. So you are into my court, but they are public servant. They can behave ordinary like other people and all they do. So that's
2 years ago, in open court, one of the erudite members of the bench made this statement with the media watching. There is nothing between us and God. I was absolutely shocked. Absolutely shocked. I cannot disagree with anything that you have said in terms of the colonial hangover of this particular profession. 100% it exists. If at all there exists a profession where coloniality does Rudratandav, it is my profession. So it's like this. वकीलों से ये उम्मीद की जाती है कि आप प्रो बोनो केसेस कुछ लड़ें, कि आप 80 to 90% आप पैसा कमाइए, 10% जो है आप चैरिटी के लिए कीजिए. Now, most people who come from the left, they end up taking human rights causes, and human rights causes would translate to minority rights. I decided to say that 10% of my time, and legitimately speaking, that's the only amount of time I'm in a position to devote, and that's the only amount of time I devote. I'm never going to say that I'm doing this for, I've taken up all these cases. No. I'm a hardcore commercial litigator who's taken a conscious decision as a practicing Hindu that I will contribute 10 to 15% of my time in this particular cause. Because 1, I'm a first generation litigator. 2, I don't have godfathers telling me, do whatever you want, we'll take care of you. 3, you will be taken seriously in a court only when you're a hardcore commercial litigator who knows the subject. 4, from a very practical perspective, कमर्शियल लिटिगेशन का जो फोरेंसिक रीडिंग होता है, जो बारीकी से पढ़ने की जो क्षमता आती है, उसको जब आप कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन या संविधान के पढ़ने में आप उसको लगाते हैं, you become better at understanding the constitution. That's one of the reasons that I made the transition. Otherwise, my interest was always in constitution. So what happens is I've taken 10% of my time to say I will devote it for this. I've been branded a Hindu propagandist lawyer for only 10% of the cases I've taken. Since 2016, ever since I went independent, गिन के 10 से कम केसेस होंगे जो मैंने धर्म के लिए लड़ा है. And that's a very conscious decision to say I will take up only those cases which I can do justice to and where I know that the depth of my ability is really necessary. Otherwise, let others also play a role in this. और जब तक ये सुप्रीम कोर्ट में नहीं आता है या फिर किसी हाई कोर्ट में नहीं आता है, I will not be in a position to touch it. क्योंकि हर फोरम का अपना एक रूल होता है, उसका अपना एक कायदा होता है, अपना एक ट्रेडिशन होता है. My face may not work in certain district courts because people may not even know who I am. Just because you happen to be practicing in the Supreme Court, you can't expect every court in the country to know you. That's not the reality of the profession. हर forum का अपना एक face value होता है. So what I'm trying to answer is, you're right that under human rights, the rights that I represent will never come under. Whatsoever. They don't matter. So in the NGO division, so a friend who used to work for one of these NGOs, जो भारत में सिविल सोसाइटी को एक्टिवेट करने का काम करती है, they decide कि जब भी minority groups के allocation के बारे में बात आती है कि funds कहाँ पे allocate होगा, सवाल नहीं पूछा जाएगा कि इस संदर्भ में minority कौन है, already decide हो चुका है. No baseline study is needed, no evidence-based study is needed, no empirical study is needed. The moment you say minority, there is only one particular samudaya vishesh that effectively gets treated as a minority community. That is the nature of these two professions. Largely yehi ecosystem. Not just that. In my profession, it is predominantly left. It is predominantly left. From legal education to legal practice, it is predominantly left. So I know exactly how difficult it is to hold the positions that I hold and still continue to practice as a commercial litigator without affecting my bottom line under any circumstances. I am not going to give it up under any circumstances. I will not. Because that keeps my independence alive. I will never be beholden to any organization. Otherwise, Bhaiya ji ka ye jo culture hai, that effectively will kill your independence. Ji sir, yehi hota rahega, that I can't do. Now, इसका change कैसे हो सकता है? These books are meant to be a step in that direction. I'm not selling the books. I'll tell you why. I can fight in Sabarimala, I can fight in Banaras, I can fight on temple control. But हर केस में अब जब आप लड़ते रहते हैं, कॉमन जो मुद्दा है इन तीनों केसेस का, वो बाहर निकल के नहीं आ रहा है. मुद्दा ये है that somebody is educated in a colonial education system for close to 20 years, then rather let's say 16 years, goes through law school for 5 years, where the only subject he is taught in the name of jurisprudence is Western political, let's say Western legal theories. You don't get taught anything else. Hindu legal thought comes into existence only for personal laws, which is marriage and succession. उससे ज़्यादा उसकी कोई अहमियत नहीं है. 3. From there you enter a profession where your ability to practice a profession depends on your ability to come out to the apt turn of phrase in English, and preferably the Queen's English. 4. Your ability to hold the bottle. Okay, these are the manners that you're expected to cultivate, to socialize apparently. 5. You must know, or you must constantly keep yourself abreast of the legal developments in United States and UK. If this is the nature of the profession or इसकी demands ये हैं, please tell me how do you expect a different outcome? मैं इस institution के सामने मैं सबरीमला का बीर बजा रहा था. What outcome can you expect other than a 4-1 outcome? The horses have already bolted from the stables, and I'm trying to run after it with one hand tied to my back and my leg broken because I'm a Hindu. How do I convince? So most people didn't realize, in an ideal situation, this issue should have never gone to court. The fact that it went to a court and the fact that a court deemed it fit to entertain the petition is proof of the advanced nature of the problem. And I'll give you another example from the very same Sabarimala case. Justice Kurian Joseph, who is a Keralite Christian, was among the first judges of a particular bench that was seized of the Sabarimala petition जब ये कोर्ट के सामने ये याचिका फाइल किया गया था. Since he is from Kerala, he effectively said, what misogyny are you talking about here? I am from that particular state. As a Christian, even I know that it's not misogyny. It's based on a particular practice there. A Christian judge from Kerala was clear about the nature of the practice. अब आपसे एक सवाल करता हूँ. भारत के ऐसे कितने हिंदू हैं जो ये कह सकते हैं? You see what I'm saying? At the very least, we should have had the humility to say, मैं पूर्व का हो सकता हूँ या उत्तर का हो सकता हूँ, लेकिन हर क्षेत्र की अपनी कुछ मान्यताएं और प्रथाएं हैं, उसके साथ मैं छेड़छाड़ नहीं करूंगा. लेकिन the worst possible example will always come from the Hindu. Will say, शास्त्र के नाम पे और प्रथा के नाम पे आपने कुछ लोगों को बाहर रखा था मंदिर के बाहर, तो आप इसी बेसिस पे इसी को भी डिफेंड करेंगे. So what you'll be constantly told is, हर प्रैक्टिस को आप अनटचेबिलिटी के साथ कंपेयर किए जाएंगे, बिकॉज उससे आपका मुंह बंद हो जाएगा. आफ्टर दैट आप क्या करेंगे? You'll try and say, are you going to compare every practice with untouchability? Is every practice going to be determined on the anvils of untouchability? So that means effectively, according to you, Hindu Dharma is all about untouchability and nothing more. You can blame the judiciary only to some extent, but judiciary is a reflection of you as a society.
इनको भगवान ने पैराशूट से यहाँ पे भेजा नहीं है। कुछ लोग ऐसे सोच सकते हैं, लेकिन ऐसा नहीं है। They have come from you, be it the politician or representative of the judiciary, ये आप ही के बीच में से निकले हैं भाई। How do you expect it to be any different? Okay, let's assume for a moment, सारी हिंदू सोसाइटी एक मत से कह रही है ये प्रथा सही है, लेकिन जुडिशरी दूसरे स्तर में बात कर रही है। Then I can still understand that this institution alone is colonized. Was that the case in 2015 and 16? No. Lawyers who were standing next to me and who were supporting me during arguments in Sabarimala were Malayali Christians and Hindus. But there were Christians also. Because वो उस क्षेत्र से हैं, उस प्रांत से हैं, वो जानते हैं कि इस मंदिर के पीछे की जो सोच है वो क्या है। Because you see what happens is, जो 41 दिन का जो आप व्रत इसमें फॉलो करते हैं, sometimes what people do is they stay away from their families. Because अगर कोई मर जाता है, you can't even be there, आपका व्रत टूट जाता है। So to avoid all of this, you take rental homes. And some of these people, therefore Christians have also rented their homes for the practicing brahmacharis. तो they know कि यहाँ पे क्या होता है। Plus, जब आप ये पैदल जाते हैं, which is a distance of about 61 kilometers, I've done this as in my younger days. You go through all those portions, and not all of those portions are necessarily populated only by Hindus. So people know what is the local reality. On Twitter, on Facebook, and in every other, let's say, social media platform, I was targeted first and foremost by Hindus and Hindus alone. इस कड़वे सत्य के साथ आप जूझिए पहले. Deal with that first. So, I will agree to everything that you have said, but I'm only going to say there is no point in going after one particular institution in isolation when the rest of the society is completely in the throes of coloniality. And it's so difficult to protect any Hindu tradition and make it understandable to Hindus first. अगर आप एक मत हो जाते हैं, तब मैं देखूंगा कि भारत में ऐसा कौन सा इंस्टीट्यूशन है जो आपके प्रथाओं और मान्यताओं के पीछे आता है. Let me see that.
राम राम सभी लोगों को. मेरा नाम जंजीत कृतिकर है. मैं नेपाल से हूँ और मैं पीएचडी कर रहा हूँ एग्रीकल्चर में. सर, मेरा दो क्वेश्चन है. एक रिलेटेड टू ये यहाँ से है और एक बियॉन्ड इंडिया, भारत एंड पाकिस्तान, दैट इज बिलोंग टू नेपाल. जी सर, आज का एक न्यूज़ में है, द बॉम्बे हाई कोर्ट चीफ जस्टिस ब्लेम द इंटरनेट फॉर द बोन चिलिंग मर्डर ऑफ श्रद्धा वाकर. Justice Dipankar Datta said such cases represent the flip side of access to materials on the internet. And I want your blunt answer on this question. And how do you relate to your book to this what the judge said? And what is your message to our dear sisters? Some of them fell prey to such victim, and until they realize, before that when we convince them, they say that मेरा वाला आफ्ताब ऐसा नहीं है. Then another question is related to Nepal. You might be knowing most of them that Nepal was a Hindu country just 1.5 decades before, until it was announced by the constitution that it is republic and dharma nirpeksha. So today is the election day in Nepal for the national and statehood state assembly. So there is two different things. The Hinduvadi party is in alliance with Communist party, that it is KP Sharma Oli. Hinduvadi, Rajavadi is in alliance with that. The Maoist person who has butchered cow is in alliance with the Democratic Congress. You might have been hearing that the mass conversion of people to Christianity in the hills and Himalayan range, and it has begun in Trai region. And other thing is like within this decade, the mass mushrooming of colonies of Muslim population in different part of Trai region, the border with India, mostly UP and Bihar. So even though what all the questions raised by the different participants here, India was physically ruled by British. but Nepal was not so. But whatever the problem is faced by Indians here, we all are facing there in Nepal. It is only in less amount, because the population of minorities below 6%, both of Muslim and Christian, are decoded back. I can't see of this census. If this census comes out, we will know what is the exact number of these minorities. So how do you see the future of demographic situation in Nepal, and how can the people tackle there in situation to Nepal, in India also? Thank you.
So I'll answer the first question, then I'll come to this. Primarily because I'm not a subject matter expert when it comes to Nepal, but I have a few tentative suggestions. Let's see if they have any value or not. One, see, on the question of what has happened to this poor girl, instead of commenting on the facts of that particular case, because the investigation is still going on and we'll only know what happened ultimately, there are two problems which I think, if you were to treat this and other cases as case studies that are coming out. One, I think perhaps Hindu families have lesser control and hold over their children. To some extent, that is the case. And this may also be because they take pride in the independence that they give to their children. So I'll give you an example. So in my engineering days as well as in law school days, people coming from the other communities would be very clear about their dietary restrictions. वो बाहर हमारे साथ आके नहीं खाएंगे जब तक वो हलाल नहीं था. They will not. Whereas we don't seem to be clear about whether we want to or we don't want to. Because the fear in you is, should I say no to a particular food which is halal certified? It reveals my Hindutva leaning is your biggest fear. And therefore you get branded in your workspaces. You'd be very comfortable celebrating Christmas, but I'm not sure how many would be comfortable celebrating Ram Navami in an office space. So, one, I think there is a problem at the family unit level. But two, the other situation also is that somehow, even in instances where the family has cautioned, warned, and said this may not end well, there seems to be some kind of a rebellious streak. Now, I don't know if they're doing this because they are genuinely interested in a person or because they want to rebel against the family. Perhaps it's a combination of both. मैं आपको दो situations देता हूँ. Please see what the end result is. First situation, you're groomed and you're trapped by someone who comes under a different alias. The net result is you're dead. Second, as an adult, you're told what the identity is. You voluntarily go into that relationship. The net result is you're dead. Now, after these experiences also, if people don't learn, you can only take the horse to the pond. You can't make it drink water. Adults at some stage may have to ask, who is responsible for certain decisions? Again, I repeat, I don't wish to be insensitive to the fact of a death. Because whoever may be responsible, ultimately the family must be grieving. Even if someone walks out of a family, says no to the family, it's the family that is shedding tears, not Abdul and Rasul. Right? So, my sympathies are with these families. For those who don't understand the reality of the situation, maybe they must be shown videos of Hindu young girls being forcibly married to older men in Pakistani courts, and how they wail and rebel and cry as to what they have been put through and what they will be subjected to. I don't know of any other way of drilling some sense into some of these issues. You might always say, well, there are certain marriages which have worked out well. Why don't we look at those examples? Marriages which have apparently worked out well have always come at the loss of your identity, not the other person's identity. Mr. Salim Khan's wife, who goes by the name Salma, was not Salma to begin with in the first place. Now, clearly, concessions and unilateral concessions are expected from one particular community. यहाँ पे हमें अपने जड़ों को पकड़ के रहना है. It's not going to be possible for you to constantly blame the other person because he is doing or she is doing what he or she has been ordered to or instructed to by what they believe in. Two, how do I make this point without becoming more controversial? Okay. The allegation of the other side whenever this happens is Hindu men are not men enough. And that's the taunt that is heard. You need to read how women were gang raped, butchered, and then hung from hooks of butcher shops, meat shops in 1946, Direct Action Day and subsequently, with clear derogatory symbols branded on their mutilated naked bodies. Because the weaponization of the female womb happens to be a tool of war in the mind of a particular group. It showed itself in Operation Searchlight in 1971 with Bengali Hindus in Bangladesh. 1905, 1906, when the partition of Bengal happened on religious lines, and the colonial establishment was openly in favor of the Muslim majority population of Eastern Bengal and Assam, which is the reason why Bangladeshi illegal migration continues in Assam, because they see it as part of the unfinished agenda of it being part of the larger Pakistani identity. The preachers, peaceful preachers, came out in public saying, the Parcham is back in full force. For 3 months we will not be arrested for whatever we do. Courts will not prosecute us. So do 3 things. Butcher the cow, destroy temples, rape Hindu widows and marry them. And this was captured by an American journalist, Nivenson, and I've captured from his book extensively in the second book. तो काल चक्र फिर से रिपीट हो रहा है. Now, इसका जवाब क्षात्र से ही दिया जा सकता है. And which means I'm not batting for toxic masculinity, but I'm certainly batting for Hindu masculinity. Because that every time a society devalues certain roles, it opens itself to a savage horde because it has lost the will to fight. And therefore, I am making the conscious statement that I am not against equal treatment. I am not someone who says, these are your roles, these are your roles. But when push comes to shove, you are expected to stand up for everybody else. And that conventional, natural role that is being given to you after thousands of years of evolution, don't go against it. Don't abandon it. If possible, one of the things that I would certainly consider doing is reviving the Hindu masculine self-confidence in a very different way. Which is to say that the representation that you are effeminate, effete, and not possessed of the virility that is expected of you, that myth needs to be busted. Now, I suspect 2 portals to latch on to this and quote this out of context to say Hindutva is about toxic masculinity. But this message needs to be said and sent without any kind of dilution. So therefore I have said it. Coming to Nepal, I happened to visit Pashupatinath about a year before the lockdown. And I happened to meet locals, and wherever I go, my job is to find out what is the position of Hindus there. That's my primary interest. And how they were saying that if you want to take control of our temples, then go back to the previous position, that we are a Hindu monarchy. You can't claim to be secular and take control of Pashupatinath and other temples, was the argument being presented then. I don't know what the situation of the argument is at this point. I would only say, hopefully while the non-majority population is still under 10%, learn from all the mistakes made by India. Don't repeat those mistakes. Nepali Hindus are very proud of their Hindu identity, to the extent I was even told that hum Indians ki tarah nahi hai. I was told this on my face. I took it. What can I say? You're right. I can't refute it. Don't give up that pride in your Hindu identity. I also saw the pernicious influence of Bollywood pop culture on Nepal in a very different way through your participation in reality shows, in some of the worst possible exports from this country. Protect yourself from all this. Take the good from India. Refuse the garbage while you still have the power to refuse it. But having raised that problem, perhaps you may also want to consider that there are some internal problems within the Nepalese Hindu community which are perhaps the reason for the acceptance of the Maoist tendency. Try and address that. Because apart from this issue, there's a dragon waiting to swallow you. And that can never be permitted. We made the mistake of allowing the dragon to swallow Tibet. And for the first time perhaps in history, India and China were neighbors, which they never should have been in the first place. Tibet should have been the buffer state. We can't afford to lose Nepal. Kailash Mansarovar already requires permits. I don't want permits for Pashupatinath. All I can say is reject the imposition of a secular constitution, because that is the beginning of a slippery slope where your traditions, your pride, everything will be constantly eaten into and the encroachment will begin. A secular constitution is equal on paper but unequal in practice because its specific target is secularization of the Hindu identity. This is the reality of Bharat. So you have the opportunity to reclaim or fight, go ahead, do it. Yes, last question. That's last question. Wait, hold on. Yes, please, go on.
Thank you very much, sir, for allowing me. Sir, my question is, due to a intolerant, violent community and growing its population, it seems that the future of our nation will be in a civil war or a massacre, depends on the unity of indigenous population. Can population control bill be a reality, number one? And number two, if it can be, will it be effective keeping in view the nature of the particular community?
So, be very careful about the language you employ. And I say this because I'm looking out for you. I'm looking out for every person who bats for this particular identity, and I don't want you to get into trouble. Replace the word with mindset. That's one. First suggestion coming from a lawyer. Take it. Two. I'm not sure the population control bill may be entirely effective, but chara kya bacha hai aapke paas? What is the other option that you have? In a democracy which is ruled by a constitution, you have to go by constitutional mechanisms. My only hunch is that the population control bill will be followed by the Hindus and not followed by the others, and therefore it will have the exact opposite consequence. Because you are more law-abiding, or at least you're law-fearing. And the state has more guts to come after Hindus than anybody else. Regardless of whoever is in power, that has not made a difference. which means that you're back to square one. There is a law against possession of illegal weapons. Has that prevented certain people from having more weapons than the others? It hasn't. So those who follow the law will continue to follow the law, and those who don't care for it will never care for it. I don't know how that works. I'm not sure the answer lies entirely in the realm of legal mechanisms, or let's say in the realm of law and policy making. Maybe the society will have to consider certain lawful and constitutional mechanisms, which means you end up having to compete in terms of producing more children. And that suggestion, had it come from someone who had spoken in Hindi, he'd have been accused of being a dinosaur who doesn't know what he's talking about. Well, it's coming from a person who is speaking in chaste English. Take it. Because that seems to be a language that finds universal acceptance, unfortunately, in this country. So accept it. And it goes back to the fundamental point of Hindu masculinity. Jai Shri Ram.
Thank you, sir. I'll request the good people here कि कुछ देर और कार्यक्रम के समापन की ओर हैं हम. सर का एक बार पुनः धन्यवाद, आप सबका धन्यवाद. कार्यक्रम में आगे मैं आमंत्रित करना चाहूँगा श्री राणा प्रताप सिंह जी को, शोध के कन्वीनर, कि वे आए और सर को धन्यवाद का ज्ञापित करें.
आप सभी को नमस्कार. प्रथम सर, हमारे निमंत्रण को स्वीकार करने, यहाँ आने और अपनी बातों को बिना लाग लपेटी कहने के लिए आपका बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद. सभागार में उपस्थित शिक्षक वृंद जैसे कि धीरेन्द्रनाथ चौबे सर, अन्य शिक्षक और श्रोतागण, आप सभी का बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद. मंच का संचालन कर रहे हैं हर्ष विक्रम सिंह, कुणाल झा, आपका भी बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद. हमारे टेक्निकल टीम का भी बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद. और अंत में एबीवीपी बीएचयू की सारी टीम का बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद, जिनके बिना सहयोग के ये कार्यक्रम इतना बढ़िया नहीं हो पाता. बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद.
आप सभी का धन्यवाद. कार्यक्रम का अंतिम फॉर्मेलिटी होगा, बहुत आवश्यक है, बहुत ज़रूरी है. आप सभी से निवेदन है कि कृपया अपने स्थान पर खड़े हो जाएं ताकि हम राष्ट्रगान का गायन कर सकें. पंजाब सिंध गुजरात मराठा द्राविड़ उत्कल बंगा विंध्य हिमाचल यमुना गंगा उच्छल जलधि तरंगा तव शुभ नामे जागे तव शुभ आशीष मांगे गाहे तव जय गाथा जनगण मंगलदायक रहे भारत भाग्य विधाता. जय हे जय हे जय हे जय 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 हे भारत माता की जय.
अरे राणा भैया